Good evening, everyone. If we could get settled. I'm Trevor Perry Giles, the Interim Executive Director of NCA, and I want to thank you for coming to tonight's annual NCA Presidential Address and Award Ceremony. Rumor has it that after a brief hiatus in the 1950s and 1960s, presidential addresses at the annual convention were resurrected at the behest of Vice President Marie Hockmuth Nichols. Anxious to present her own address in 1969 when she ascended to the presidency, Nichols allegedly compelled then-President Douglas Enninger to present his presidential address against his will in 1968. Ever since, we've been honored to hear thoughts from each of our presidents at the annual convention. And those thoughts are, what do they call it? Anthologized on the NCA website. Tonight, it's my honor to introduce NCA's 103rd president, Stephen John Hartnett. Stephen John Hartnett is a professor in the Department of Communication at the University of Colorado, Denver, where he is the editor of Captured Words, Free Thoughts, an annual magazine of poems and stories crafted by imprisoned writers. For the past 27 years, he's been teaching in and writing about and working for change at American prisons. He has taught college classes and poetry workshops in prisons and jails in Indiana, Illinois, Michigan, Texas, California, and Colorado, and has facilitated workshops, participated on panels, and given lectures against the death penalty in 28 states. His commentary on these subjects has appeared in Salon, Alternet, In These Times, and others, and on MSNBC and over 100 radio stations nationwide. He is one of the co-founders of PCARE, a national group of scholars who work on prison communication activism research and education. And in recognition of this work, he has received numerous awards, including the Northwest Communication Association's 2008 Human Rights Award, the University of Colorado's 2010 Thomas Jefferson Award, and the University of Colorado Denver's 2014 Service Excellence Award. Hartnett is also the author or editor of 9 books and dozens of publications related to democracy, social justice, prisons, globalization and empire, and the death penalty, including his latest work, the co-edited Imagining China, Rhetorics of Nationalism in the Age of Globalization from Michigan State University Press this year. His publications appear in venues such as the Quarterly Journal of Speech, Rhetoric and Public Affairs, the Journal of Applied Communication Research, and Communication and Critical Cultural Studies. He is the recipient of numerous research awards, including the Wine and Wych-Elms Award for Distinguished Research in Public Address, the National Communication Association's Golden Monograph Award, the Coors Campbell Prize in Rhetorical Criticism, and a PASS, Prevention for a Safer Society Award from the National Council on Crime and Delinquency. It's been my honor to work with Stephen over the past year or so as he's guided NCA masterfully. I'm reminded every time I hear from Stephen, or whenever I watch him guide a meeting, or the times I've heard him orate, of the words from Walt Whitman's Song of the Open Road. I and mine do not convince by arguments, similes, rhymes, we convince by our presence. Stephen's pretty good with arguments. He's okay with similes, and he occasionally rhymes. But he's truly convincing with his presence. With infectious energy, deep commitment, and sincerely felt passion, Stephen Hartnett convinces with his presence, and we're the better for it. So I'm pleased to introduce to you for his presidential address entitled Communication, Globalization, and the Prospects for Solidarity, my friend, our colleague, and NCA's 103rd president, Stephen John Hartnett.
Thank you, Trevor. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming to our annual presidential address and awards ceremony. Thank you, Trevor, for that very sweet invitation, or introduction. The next time I'm having a bad day, I'll call you up and I'll ask you to reread that to me. The title of my talk is Communication, Globalization, and the Prospects of Solidarity. And you can see on the screen here a photograph of NCA's fantastic task force for fostering international collaboration in the age of globalization. I want to ask you to look at the photograph with me. As I go across the list of my colleagues, I see people representing Taiwan, Macau, South Korea, Hong Kong, Kenya, China, Pakistan, India, Afghanistan, China, and America. I share this national list with you by way of indicating that to do work around questions of globalization and the internationalization of higher education is, by definition, to celebrate and expand the range of diversity and inclusion. I've heard panel after panel after panel at this conference talking about the importance of diversity and inclusion, and I, of course, endorse that and celebrate that. And I think if we think about internationalizing higher education, it means to expand the realm of diversity and inclusion. Now, with that first main point in mind, before I go into the rest of my talk, I want to do some thank yous. First, I want to turn to Dr. Paige Turner, who I think is sitting over here somewhere. As you all know, from April 1st to September 18th of this year, Paige was our executive director. And for those 6 months, she poured her heart and soul into advancing the mission and vision of the organization. I want to ask you all to please join me now in saying, Paige, thank you for your service. I also want to thank Dr. Trevor Perry-Giles. We as an organization have now turned to Trevor twice in the past 18 months at a moment of leadership transition to say, Trevor, we need your steady hands on the wheel. We need you to make sure that our mission and vision continues to grow and expand. And Trevor has done that masterfully. You all know him as an award-winning scholar, as an award-winning teacher, as a tireless provider of service, but I'm here to testify to his also being a magnificent manager of our day-to-day operations. We are truly lucky to have such a unique individual serving as our interim executive director. So I want you also to join me in saying, Trevor, thank you so much. I'm now going to thank people in groupings, and I'll ask you to applaud after the groupings. I'll let you know when those are. You can see on the list Wendy Fernando. I believe Wendy is here in the room somewhere. Wendy, there she is in back. Everything that we do as an organization goes through Wendy. The fantastic recent issue of Spectre, which I hope you've all read and enjoyed, Wendy edits that. Communication Currents, Wendy edits that. Our convention newsletter, Wendy edits that. When we released all of our statements this summer to all of our members about Texas legislation, Wendy edited that. So when we look good, it's because Wendy helps us look good. She's just fantastic at her job. Wendy's lieutenant is Jenna Sauber, who I think is also here somewhere, and it's Jenna who has taken last convention's social justice exchange and turned it into an amazing online resource. And I'm hoping that all of you will have occasion in the coming months to help your colleagues and students go to the social justice exchange on our website, where it offers a step-by-step how-to manual on how to become better activists to apply communication for the common good. And it's Jenna who did much of that work for us. I also want to turn to Justin Danowski, who is our new governance manager. He's done a fantastic job in this capacity. So on behalf of Wendy, Jenna, Justin, and everyone at the national office who works tirelessly on our behalf, please give them a round of applause. Now, I think we've had a good convention. Is that true? Well, if we've had a good convention, it's because of two people. Vice President Ron Jackson and Kristen Summers. There are two convention planners. They're the folks who've put together all our creative scheduling, our creative planning. I think they've been flexible, they've been creative. I think there's been poetry, there's been performance, there's been so much exciting stuff going on at this convention. So let's have a round of applause for Kristen and Ron. I want to thank Steve Beebe. Steve Beebe is one of our past presidents, and it was Steve Beebe who set the precedent of saying, even though we're called the National Communication Association, we can look at internationalization as an important issue. And on our website, there is an internationalization tab. It's there because of Steve Beebe and his great work. And I also want to look at Christy Beck, who I know is here tonight. Christy is our outgoing, immediate past president. And Christy, there she is. You have modeled a kind of leadership based on kindness and generosity, inclusivity in all decision-making processes. It has been my honor to get to follow you and work with you. So let's say thank you to Steve Beebe, Christy Beck, and Carol Blair. The NCA Executive Committee has done great work this year. We've been traveling all across the country doing job searches and getting things together. So thanks to everybody on the Executive Committee. Those of you who've done this before know that the conference, in addition to Ron Jackson's amazing labors, it's really the program planners who do the kind of nuts and bolts of picking who comes and how do we organize them and how do we set up our panels. So thank you to all of our program planners and unit leaders. I want to thank my colleagues at CU Denver who have been so patient. They've shown so much forbearance as I have dedicated myself to NCA and maybe not to Denver as much as I should have. So I want to thank my colleagues there. And I want to end my thank yous by looking at my darling wife. See, I'm tearing up. Lisa Kiernan, scholar, teacher, amazing chair, stepmother to our children, my best friend. Thank you so much for everything you do, darling. All right, so I wanted to go full Fidel Castro on you. I was going to give like a 13-hour lecture. And then Trevor said, how about 15 minutes? So I'm going to aim for somewhere in the middle. I'm going to do 4 things, but I'm going to do them quickly. I'm going to talk about globalization. We're going to talk about communication. We're going to talk about this idea of solidarity. And I want to end by talking about the ways the NCA is trying to institutionalize mechanisms and processes to help you all practice solidarity in the age of globalization. My talk is meant to be quick, illustrative, suggestive. And I've shown you here a picture of a boat sitting on top of a building. That's not where they usually get parked. That was one of the consequences of the tsunami that devastated the eastern coast of Japan. And I've given you that image because I want us to think about globalization as the age of catastrophe. Our catastrophes are sometimes natural, they're usually political. Here's an image of refugees waiting on the shores of the Mediterranean, hoping to be so lucky as to get safe passage so that they can get smuggled into Greece and Italy on their way into what will no doubt be devastatingly unwelcome refugee camps. The United Nations estimates that as of today, there are 50 million refugees in the world. 50 million. We have not had 50 million political refugees on the world since the closing days of World War II. And so when you think about what people call the age of globalization, think about that as a comparison, that not since the devastation of World War II have we had so many political refugees roaming the earth looking for shelter, clothing, comfort, all of the things that we take for granted. The 50 million refugees are largely a product of what I'm calling here the dissolution of nations and alliances. Think of what's going on right now where the Kurds are seeking their independence, and both Iraq and Turkey are waging war against the Kurds. Think about the Catalonians seeking their independence from Spain, and Spain threatening them with military intervention. Think about the Brexit from EU, where Britain just throws its hands up and walks away from a 50-year-long alliance. Think of the failing states in Yemen, Somalia, Afghanistan, Iraq, Venezuela, Colombia. I could name 20 more. What we're seeing is the dissolution of the nation state, and whether you were a fan of the nation state or not, the nation state is what has for hundreds of years provided us with some sense of safety and obligation. And when the nation states dissolve, when the alliances that hold them together dissolve, then we have waves and waves of refugees. The wave of refugees is being caused in large part by what I'm going to call here globalization's tensions. Now, every one of these tensions can be deconstructed in 100 ways. I want to be very clear about that every one of you, I'm sure, has a different definition of these terms and a different analysis of these terms. And yet these are still kind of, I think, useful heuristic devices for thinking about the tensions that plague our current moment. And at the bottom of the page, I've given you the way that I like to kind of summarize this. What globalization has done via the diffusion of markets, the diffusion of goods, the spread of new technologies, is it has lifted 1 billion people out of poverty. This is one of the great human advancements of all time. 1 billion people lifted out of poverty. And yet those exact same mechanisms of development have made it possible for that we now have 8% of the global population owning 80% of all global wealth. And so our moment of globalization is a moment for me of complete paradox, almost paralyzing contradictions of hope and inequality, of possibility and dilemma, of what I'm calling catastrophe, and yet the sense that there may be some hope involved in this as well. I think it is unfortunate that in this moment of great confusion and complexity, what we need is nuance. We need analysis. We need sophisticated analyses of how we got into this moment and how to work our way out. And instead, too many people are settling for cheap answers, for easy answers, for answers that are banal and trivial and ugly. And the word for that, I believe, is Trump. Trump is the word for that. But let's be clear that Trump is not a local phenomenon. Trumpism is in fact a global phenomenon. And look at the characteristics of Trumpism: a war on science, and especially climate science, the alienation of allies, the dismissal of facts, cheerful, just happy misogyny, You've all seen the video, right? I grope women. Cheerful misogyny. Institutionalized corruption, and a return to white supremacy. These are not indicative just of Trump. These are the characteristics as well of the regime run by Mr. Duterte in the Philippines, and here they are making nice together. Putin in Russia, the new right in Europe, the alt-right in America, they share these characteristics. It's a global phenomenon. It's a global phenomenon driven by alienation and anger and confusion in response to globalization. Thus far, I've portrayed for you a nightmare scenario. Globalization as catastrophe leading up to the unfortunate consequence of Trumpism as a global phenomenon. Now, let me ask you, in the best tradition of speech communication, to flip this entire thesis on its head, and rather than catastrophe, let's talk about post-World War II globalization as the miracle of communication. And here's Dr. Martin Luther King appearing on a stamp in India. King went to India in 1959 because he and Gandhi were going to form common cause, bringing their two movements together. What a beautiful moment in the history of the internationalization of a notion of social justice. I've given you here a list of the great dates in which communication was used as the miracle of building peace. We've been around for thousands and thousands of years, and we've made an art of slaughtering each other on the basis of race and class and gender and nationality. And think about it, in 1948, representatives from Asia, Europe, North America, South America all get together and say, what if we had a document justifying global peace? What an amazing concept. And every one of these groups is based on that concept that ours should be a new age of global activism and communication for peace. And so for me, I don't know about you, but every day for me, I feel like there's a conflict between the catastrophe and the miracle. Now for me, I can't solve the crisis. I don't think there's an answer to this. But I think there's a practice, and I think the practice can be a way of getting around the conflict. And I like to just call that, for lack of a better word, solidarity. Solidarity means doing with, working alongside, learning from, and fighting for justice with others. And here's a picture of the Women's March on Washington, D.C., and I know that a lot of you were at that march. A lot of you supported that march. What some of you probably missed, we captured it here in this secret photograph, some people marching from the Social Justice and Activism Division, which is now the fastest growing division in the NCA. And I want to say congratulations to Drs. Larry Fry and Kristen Blinny for making that such a fantastic division. I think they deserve some applause for that work. Now, I know that many of you do this. As I look around the room, I have learned from so many of you in terms of how you practice solidarity, how you use your communication expertise to work for the common good. And so I want now to just celebrate some of you and celebrate the ways that you do this tremendous work on a global scale. This is Etta Mutua's students from St. Cloud University in Minnesota, and they're video conferencing with fifth graders in Kenya. This is a truly magical moment when students in Kenya can receive love and support and information from students in St. Cloud who are also receiving love and information and support from the students in Kenya. So our first example is we can use video teleconferencing to create international solidarity within our classrooms. Here's another example of two students, Bayan and Ruba, who are at the IUPUI Global Health Communication Center. And John Parrish, I thought John was going to be here tonight. Are you here, John? John is doing such amazing work, partnering with the World Health Organization, building institutional infrastructure, building programs, and practicing health communication in Jordan, Sierra Leone, Uganda, and so many others. John, I am so impressed with what you do. It's just incredible. So here's health communication as a kind of solidarity with other parts of the world that can use our help, but where we also learn from them, okay? So it's a partnership. It's not charity. It's not giving. It's a partnership. Here's another example. This is my friend Patrick Dodge on the left, Supriya Vestal, the third from the left. These are students from both China and America, and they're on a travel study class in Inner Mongolia, where to celebrate Earth Day, they're planting trees. So this is a travel study class of international students doing environmental justice work all at the same time. So it's service learning and travel study as immersions into new cultures and civic engagement. Just a beautiful, beautiful photograph of how teaching can be done well in the name of social justice. Here's another example. This is Billy Murray. Billy sent me this photograph. Billy's marching against the Klan in Georgia. Now, I know that Georgia doesn't say to you, oh, internationalization or globalization, but what the Klan is doing in Georgia is exactly what's happening in Myanmar at this very moment, where millions of men, women, and children are being chased from their homes in the names of racial hatred, ethnic divide, religious divides. So when you march with Black Lives Matter against the Klan in Georgia, you are acting in solidarity with people all around the globe who face these same crises, and Billy does this so well. She's got an essay about this on our Social Justice Exchange website if you want to read more about Billy's work marching against the Klan. Mohan Datta works at National University of Singapore. He's a real force for health communication. What a tremendous individual. And what Mohan is doing here is he's gone into a village in West Bengal and bringing health communication skills, working with the women pictured here, and they're merging community organizing, communication training, and resource allocation, really taking it to the front lines of social change. Mohan's just out there on the front lines doing this amazing work. Here's a picture, example number 6, from Dr. Brian Keith Alexander and his team. They go to El Salvador. They work with a group called CRISPAS, Christians for Peace. And the idea, as you all know, El Salvador suffered through a terrible, just genocidal civil war. And they're just coming together as a culture, learning how to talk and heal and how to kind of go through the process of truth and reconciliation. And so here's communication being used to facilitate truth and reconciliation. Here's another example of Chuck Braithwaite from the University of Nebraska, who's traveled all the way to Kabul University in Muscat, Oman, to work with his friend and colleague, Dr. Al Hanai, who came from there to here to get a PhD and has returned home to do good work. And they're using video conferencing to form friendships amongst their two students. And remember, of course, since 9/11, there is perhaps no prejudice in our country as great as Islamophobia. So to take your students and to take your institution and to take your love and your energy into the Middle East and to form these partnerships is truly an act of giving, of partnering, of collaborating. These are just 7 examples. I'm sure that you've all got 50 more. What they show us is that using our communication skills to practice solidarity in the age of globalization is possible. It's what we do. It's what we do well. Now, I want to help the NCA to help you to do more of this. And so as your president, what I've done all year long is to work with the task force and work with the national office and to work with you all to try to create an infrastructure to enable more of this kind of work. The first thing we've done is we've created a biennial conference with the Chinese University of Communication. We're calling it Communication, Media, and Governance in the Age of Globalization. We did this in 2015. We did it in 2016, and now we're doing it this year in 2018, and I am so, so proud that our partners from China have flown all the way around the world to be here with us. Can I have my friends from the Communication University of China? There they are. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for being here. Our governments are committed to war, but we as colleagues and scholars are committed to peace. And so I want to invite everyone to please go to the NCA website. You can find the conference call there. I want to welcome you to Beijing in 2018. We will have so much fun. We're also publishing a series of books from these conferences. So the NCA is doing everything it can think of to create venues to support your scholarship. The second thing we're doing is we have a new brochure that we're passing out. It's called Internationalizing the Communication Discipline. This is a photograph we took from a travel study class run by Soumya Bardam from Kansas State. Soumya knows more about travel study than anyone I've ever met, and she's found a way to make travel study an immersion in social justice. Here her students are in the Middle East, having a great trip, learning about foreign cultures. The brochure is meant for you to take to your home campuses, to talk to your administrators, your colleagues, your peers, your students, to think about ways that you too can expand the range of internationalizing higher education in the age of globalization. It's kind of a set of best practices. This was co-authored by everyone on the task force, so I want to thank them for their great effort. The third thing we're doing is we've set up a kind of emergency response team. So let's say that you go home to your institution, you read our globalization brochure, you want to go into internationalization. You want to, say, have a travel study class to Turkey, or you want to set up video conferencing with Kenya, or you want to go to a conference in China, and your administration is like, we're not interested. We don't have funds. We can't help you do that. Give us a call. Give us a call in the national office, and what we will do, working with the national office and the task force, is we will come to your campus. And we will talk to your chair. We will talk to your dean. We'll talk to your chancellor. Whoever it is that is wrong-headed and block-headed and provincial and thinking small ball, call us and we'll come to your campus and we'll help them think about big ball. So we're setting up then, let's just review here, conferences to support your scholarship, brochures to embody best practices, and then we'll come to your campus to help you implement best practices. And these are the ways that NCA as an organization wants to support you. This is our way of creating infrastructure to support you. If you answer my invitation to practice the internationalization of higher education, to embody solidarity, I promise you will quickly, as you just saw with our Chinese friends, you will come to cherish new friendships. You will innovate your pedagogy in just exciting and wonderful new ways. You'll build institutional alliances that you never thought possible. You'll enhance your scholarship in just amazing new ways, ways that you can't even imagine until they happen. And you can do all of this while working for the common good. So it's like win, 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 win. Everybody wins. And here's an example of some of us at a party we held in Beijing for some of our students. And as you can see, it's fun. Doing the work of solidarity, age of globalization, when it's done well, it can be joyous. It should be full of laughter. It should be full of dancing. And as you see in the photograph, we're just having fun. Here's some resources for those of you if you want more interest in these ideas. I love Amnesty, Greenpeace, Human Rights Watch. These are some of the great groups in the world pushing social justice on a global scale. Of course, the National Communication Association's website has them as well. And so here's resources for you if you need them. I want to thank you for your attention. I want to thank you for your time. I want to thank you for being great members of the NCA. And I want to end on a question. I want you all to take this question home with you as you go back to your campuses. How can I and my colleagues use our communication expertise to embody solidarity in the age of globalization? Thank you very much.